Overthinking Futurama!
This episode's title is a reference to the 1990 album Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. Not being familiar with the artist or the album, I don't feel qualified to comment on any potential overlapping themes or similarities, but before the end of this video, I will suggest a new title for the Futurama episode that actually rhymes with the album title. And will cost me at least one friend.
What do you think of the view, Fry?
It's like fingernails on the chalkboard of my ears.
From up here, an entire world can seem utterly insignificant.
I can forgive Fry for using the words up here to describe being in outer space. What I can't forgive is this button. There's no logical reason for a wiper control to be here. This is a prime example of cartoon convenience placement. It's there for the joke, and as soon as it stops being useful, it simply ceases to exist. If only the real world had those laws of physics. I mean, yeah, we might lose some stuff of nostalgic value, but it'd be worth it to be rid of the politicians. By the way, this wiper doesn't come anywhere close to reaching the entire windshield. Are there other wipers controlled by other buttons, and who's running around to push them all after the pilot stupidly steers us through a swarm of space gnats? Not me. The button's not even there in the wide shot, which is where I am because I'm napping on this passenger couch. These screens appear to be security monitors showing different parts of the ship, but when they switch, it's the same 4 pictures, just swapped to different screens. And weirdly enough, they weren't just copied and pasted. Each version of the same image is slightly different from the others, indicating that each picture was redrawn for each screen. I love a good perspective gag, but for this to work, this tiny planet must have been traveling along roughly the same course as the ship, only slightly slower. Look how gradually they approach it, despite how fast the ship is moving. For the stars to have this kind of parallax motion, the ship must be going many times faster than the speed of light, which is impossible according to yada yada something Einstein, but the ship can do it because yada yada something dark matter engines. How did the planet achieve this speed? Maybe it's not a planet at all. Maybe they just smushed a spherical starship carrying millions of tiny alien refugees. What a hilarious gag. Watching the planet in slow motion reveals an interesting animation detail. In the 3 frames before it splatters on the windshield, the rings tilt or distort slightly, as if the rings hit the glass before the central mass. I guess this counts as a nobody would have noticed if they hadn't overthink, and it really is a nice touch, but it blasts by so fast that I have to wonder why they even bothered. Okay, show, you're on. This episode, we're gonna count the naked aliens. Madison Cube Garden is a cute reference to modern-day Madison Square Garden, but do you ever start to feel like Hollywood writers and producers think the entire universe consists of Los Angeles and New York, and that most people work in show business? I probably didn't even need to explain the reference. If this sports-illiterate Canadian nerd knows about Madison Square Garden, then I'm sure probably anybody watching this does too. After all, you all watch TV, and approximately all of the shows are set in New York. And it's a darn good thing, too, because if they weren't, how on earth would we learn how to understand all the in-jokes about New York life and culture? Great. It's a vicious cycle now, isn't it? By the way, this is just comedies. I didn't even include the crime dramas or the superhero shows. And no joke, first time I heard of King of Queens, I didn't realize Queens was a place, and I thought it was about something very different. Mars Greenskins is of course a reference to the former name of Washington's pro football team, which was changed in 2020 because the term is generally considered pejorative toward Native Americans. Funnily enough, and yes, that's a real word, the native Martians, introduced a few seasons later in the episode Where the Buggalo Roam, are themselves a parody of Native American stereotypes. I'm not sure if this connection was intentional, but the native Martians don't have green skin. Their skin is gray. I mean, yes, a few have a greenish tint, but if you break down the RGB values, most have at least as much red or blue, if not more. And in all cases, they're pretty close to an even gray. So maybe the name Greenskins doesn't refer to the native Martians at all. Maybe it's just a reference to the little green men trope, a stereotypical depiction of extraterrestrials popular in the mid-20th century. Or maybe, like many team names, it's just meant to symbolize something tough and formidable that you don't want to mess with, like an avocado. Or an unripe banana. You laugh, but you definitely won't be biting those players.
Is Blernsball exactly the same as baseball?
Baseball? God forbid.
Face it, Fry.
Something was cut out here after they finished the animation, including compositing the foreground with the background. Let's watch this in slow motion here. You can see that Leela's head turns very suddenly just before she says, "Face it, Fry," which sounds more like the start of a concluding sentence rather than an opening one. You can also just barely see the cut in the professor's head movement. What really clinches it though is the crowd member behind Leela, who suddenly cuts to being partway through his blinking animation. His eyes here are opening, not closing. Interestingly, the 2 frames of animation right after the cut pass by much more quickly than they should. As for what process might have introduced this little artifact, I am not certain. In any case, I can't believe they had more dialogue trashing the world's most boring sport, and we're never gonna get to hear it.
Face it, Fry. Baseball was as boring as Mom and apple pie.
Don't you talk about apple pie like that. I should probably clarify for my non-American viewers that this is a play off of the idiom American as Mom and apple pie, and sometimes they throw baseball in there as well, even though none of those things were invented in America. Just saying, okay? Don't shoot the messenger. You could still say things are American as airplanes, post-it notes, and the indelible acting method of Nicolas Cage.
That's why they jazzed it up.
Boring. Baseball wasn't... So they finally jazzed it up.
Is how all my friends who are fans of any sport would react in this situation. End of story, case closed, moving on. As a casual viewer, I thought this alien with the Glorks 316 sign was a reference to Austin 316, but additional research tells me it's actually a parody of Roland Stewart, a.k.a. Rainbow Man, who used to wear a rainbow afro wig and hold up religious signs at major sporting events. That's what people seem to remember anyway. I couldn't find any pictures of him holding signs. Rather, it looks like he wore religious messages on his shirts. So maybe this is a Mandela effect thing. In any case, he later went on to do some crazy stuff. This side of the stadium is populated by those Q-tip audience people who also starred as the pod racing audience in Star Wars The Phantom Menace, the same year this episode came out. Sadly, they haven't worked much since.
What just happened?
Most of the names on Leela's scorecard are the names of Futurama writers and producers. Notable exceptions include Karras, Adler, Costanza, Maris, Zork Jr., Quizdlejd, Raspberry, and Jones with Clemens arms. There's that alien nudity we were looking for. In this scene, the ball flies off to the right, which is the direction of third base. We're at a slight angle, so maybe it's heading straight down the middle towards second. This guy catches the ball near the pitcher's mound and somehow flies off toward first base and then lands in Bender's glove, which means if we look at the opening shot, which establishes where the crew is sitting, the ball flew around like this. Physics, am I right? Ruins everything. Is that his fly?
Just give me something crawling with parasites.
At least hot dogs haven't changed.
I see what you did there. But wait.
Let me have one of your young on a roll.
We're out of rolls.
I looked it up. A hot dog bun is a type of roll, so in your face, minimum wage side character.
Who wants popcorn?
Oh, I'll have some.
Anyone want butter on that?
How glad I am that I did not see what you did there. See, I'm with this guy. He straight up removed his eyes so he wouldn't have to see it.
The blurns are loaded, the count's 3 blurns and 2 anti-blurns, and the infield blurn rule is in effect.
Except for the word blurn, that was complete gibberish.
The name Blernsball came from a joke among the writing team. Producing Futurama was such a massive amount of work in the early days that they invented an extra day of the week called Blerns Day so they'd have enough time to do everything they needed to do. The ball got hit. That's never happened. Everyone act shocked and surprised. What it's like to be me at literally any sporting event.
Yes! Miller's on a pace to hit 70 blurns.
Apparently this name is pronounced Miller. I'm never gonna figure out these New York accents.
Now, Wireless Joe Jackson, there was a blurn-hitting machine.
Exactly. Wireless Joe was nothing but a programmable bat on wheels.
You humans are so scared of a little robot competition, you won't even let us on the field.
There's all kinds of robots down there.
They're bat boys, ball polishers, sprinkler systems, but how many robot managers are there? And what a surprise! Look who's scraping up the filth!
So now we're getting to the real meat of this episode. The status of robots in future society is a little muddy. All robots appear to be designed for a specific purpose, but many, including Bender, are paid for their work and have basic rights. Some become wealthy actors. Some become criminals. They can vote, own homes, engage in relationships, and generally enjoy a high degree of freedom. But whether robots in general are recognized as sentient life is not at all clear. For example, does this sweeper robot get a paycheck and kick back with a cold one in his lazy bot at the end of the day, or does it belong to a subjugated lower class of robot? What about stationary things like garbage disposals or intercoms? Are they just advanced AI programs with no sentience, or do they all have the same self-awareness as Bender and other high-functioning robots?
Am I still a good person?
I don't know, sir. I'm a program built into the intercom.
For that matter, are the higher robots really sentient, or are they just programmed to act that way? And that's where I'm going to pull the brake on this train of thought, because as I sit here recording this in 2023, it's starting to hit a little too close to reality.
Oh, dear Lord, my new pager.
Pager is an interesting term for what is clearly a two-way holographic communication device.
Shoot! Professor, turn me off, quick!
What?
If this bird is flying off with Hermes' communication signal, does that make it a carrier pigeon? Seriously though, what is happening on the other end of this call? It appears all of Hermes' senses are attached to the hologram being projected by the pager, so he feels like he's being grabbed and carried off. There are so many situations in which this type of mental projection would be useful. No, not that, you pervs. Although, now that I think about it, I guess it could help out with long-distance relationships, but on the other hand, if you can only project yourself at 1/10 size, that might get weird. Now Hermes has injuries? Is this a Matrix, your mind makes it real type situation? And this is the end of it. They don't explain any of this.
Great news, everyone.
Oh, almost. The infamous good news, everyone, won't be said for 2 more episodes.
You'll be delivering a package to Chopek 9.
Chopek 9, a.k.a. the robot homeworld, was named for Czech writer Karel Chopek, who popularized the word robot and was the first person to use it in a written work, although he credits his brother Josef for actually inventing the term.
A world where humans are killed on sight.
And by killed on sight, he means captured, given a public trial, and sentenced to menial jobs, and then killed in a secret private ceremony that nobody else knows about. This hardly explains the planet's reputation, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
I'm glad you asked that question, Fry.
The professor uses the archaic pronunciation of axe, bringing us to 5 occurrences in 5 episodes.
Chapek 9 was colonized centuries ago by a murderous crew of radical robot separatists.
This muddies the waters of robot sentience and choice even further. We later see robots revolting against humans in the episode Mother's Day, in which Mom uses her universal robot controller to make them rebel in an effort to take over the world. There's also a robot uprising, led by Bender, unsurprisingly, in 3028 of an alternate timeline seen in the Season 9 episode Decision 3012. According to time-traveling presidential candidate Chris Travers, they revolt after Nixon's re-election causes a chain of events that results in them having to do all the menial labor. Process that as you will. It's not the episode I'm overthinking right now. The point is, robots, including these radical separatists mentioned by the professor, seem to have a degree of freedom in following or rebelling against the purpose for which they were created, but that freedom can also be overruled by outside forces, such as Mom's controller. Or even the upgrading machine we see in Obsoletely Fabulous.
I love those magnificent 1X robots!
It's like he's not him anymore.
Here's the big question. When Mom pushes that button to make the robots rebel, is she robbing them of free will, or actually granting it to them? To clarify, especially for those of you who know what comes later, I'm not talking about free will in the absolute philosophical sense, like what's explored in the Season 9 episode Free Will Hunting. In that episode, Bender struggles to find meaning in life after realizing that his choices and behavior are predetermined by his programming. It seems that many, if not most, robots realize they don't have free will, and a significant part of the episode explores how different robots accept or cope with that reality. Bender then learns that he has an empty free will slot, something that was installed in all Mom Corp robots, in case hardware that could grant robots free will was ever invented. I won't spoil the rest, but it's one of my favorite episodes. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. But if robots don't have free will, how do we have a situation where they can rebel against their purpose, or even become radical separatists? Were they programmed to do so? Are they malfunctioning? Possibly, but I suspect what's really going on is that advanced robots were designed to mimic free will, like how ChatGPT mimics human language, or Nicolas Cage mimics being an actor. There may be a degree of randomness such that 2 identical robots in the same situation might do something slightly different, or maybe they're so complex that no 2 can be completely identical, and unseen variations in their makeup result in a certain amount of unpredictable behavior. However it works, it allows robots to step outside and move beyond the operations that they were designed for, and perhaps this was done intentionally so that robots could evolve. Still, there's always a part of them that's drawn to the thing that they were programmed to do, as we see in Bender's constant, sometimes unconscious urge to bend. Perhaps the tension between these two forces is what creates a robot's complex personality.
Bender will have to make the actual delivery.
I get it. Make the robot do all the work.
This is the first actual work you've ever had to do around here.
Well, he did help with the collecting of the animals on Vergon 6, and one could argue his attempt to retrieve the keys from the claw machine in episode 2 was work-related. Too much of a stretch? That's for the comments to decide.
It's a robot holiday.
Which one?
Only Robonica, the holiest 2 weeks on the robot calendar.
Although Bender makes up Robonica as a ploy to get out of work, Robot Judaism is an actual religion in Futurama. Later in the series, Fry crashes a bat mitzvah.
What's the deal? You guys don't believe in Robot Jesus?
We believe he was a very well-programmed robot, but he wasn't our messiah.
Sounds like Robonica might be an actual thing, although I suspect Bender's version of it isn't exactly robo-kosher.
No shellfish!
I'd love to think about what Leela is saying here, but I'm way too distracted by the changing size of her pupil.
This planet is completely uninhabited?
It's inhabited by robots.
Kind of like how a warehouse is inhabited by boxes.
Fry knows that Bender is a robot, right?
It's time to get to work.
Yes, Miss Leela, tote that space barge, lift that space bale.
Tote that barge, lift that bale is a line from the song Old Man River from the 1927 musical play Showboat. And while Bender whining that he's overworked is kind of pathetic, the next two lines are incredibly fitting for his character.
You get a little drunk and you land in jail.
No one would have noticed if they hadn't made Fry and Leela's hair blow in the wind from the open hatch, which makes the fact that they did that much more awesome.
This ought to show that stupid robot we care about him.
Is that a liquor bottle menorah?
I'm in trouble. They found out I work with humans and...
You're making a delivery from Earth. Of course you work with humans. Did these robots forget to check the vendor when they placed the Amazon order? Of course, we all know what really happened. Some robot was complaining about his boss, and Bender had to one-up him, like, wait till I tell you about the people I work with.
Oh no! Oh no!
He's so startled by this that his mouth lines straight up jump off his head. The angle and height of Bender's body doesn't change when the other robots start dragging him. Clearly he was already in this position when he made the call. That's kind of weird. So there's these dangling cables over here that I might not have even noticed, except that they're the same colors as Fry's and Leela's hair, which maybe is a coincidence, but it seems like it shouldn't be, and I'm like, what?
What are we gonna do?
I don't know. If only I had 2 or 3 minutes to think about it.
Remember commercial breaks? It sure is great that we don't have to put up with that crap anymore. Why is Fry sawing off the end of the pot handle? It's still obviously a pot. Wouldn't it make more sense to saw off the entire handle and maybe cover your face? Seriously, cover your face.
I can sort of dance like a robot.
Fry, first of all, this is serious.
Says the woman wearing a colander on her head.
And second of all...
Leela, first of all, this is serious. And second of all...
We look stupid. We should have gotten store-bought costumes.
Eh?
Yeah, but there wasn't a Woolworth in this quadrant.
Probably because the last Woolworth's department store closed in July of 1997, 1,003 years before this episode is set, and nearly 2 years before the episode aired. Yeah, maybe the company came back, but I'm more interested in this from a production standpoint. Why is an extinct store referenced here? In a 2001 interview with Science Fiction Weekly, co-creator David X. Cohen revealed that it takes a minimum of 9 months to go from initial idea to an episode that's ready to air. And at the time he gave the interview, they were working more than a year in advance, since their episodes kept getting bumped for football games and the like. Fox really did not value this show during its original run. Anyway, this is only the 5th episode, so they wouldn't have had the same backlog. Either the writers didn't realize that Woolworth's was gone, or they did realize it and figured it was still fresh enough in people's minds to be a funny reference.
Halt! Be you robot or human?
Are those the only two options? Do they not get any other types of visitors? Or do they just consider all non-robotic life to be human?
Administer the test. Which of the following would you most prefer? A puppy, a pretty flower from your sweetie, a large properly formatted data file?
Is the puppy mechanical in any way?
No, it is the bad kind of puppy.
Then we'll go with that data file.
You may pass.
Google presents Reverse CAPTCHA. It's a work in progress. Cool transformation, bro, but why? This is one of the most visually entertaining sequences I've seen in an animated show, but it's always bothered me that in this top-down shot, Fry and Leela are nowhere to be seen. Or so I thought until I was making this video and watched it in slow motion and realized you can actually see them getting pushed out of frame in opposite directions, which explains why they're so far apart after the robot stampede. Once again, nice attention to blink and you'll miss it detail. The span of time from 12 o'clock to 12:01 is just under 11 1/4 seconds.
Sorry, can't help you. Hey, don't drop that there! Oh.
You gotta love a good Tetris reference, but what exactly are these robots trying to build that doesn't allow for a single solid horizontal line? I mean, you could do some kind of archway, but that's a pretty narrow opening. When we cut to the second shot of the Tetris wall, there's a weird three-piece sitting on the ground, and the top right block of the purple square has disappeared. I see what you did there.
Come on, Fry, walk like a robot.
What's wrong with how Fry's walking? It's not like there's some set way that a robot walks in this universe. Some walk like humans, some have wheels and don't move their limbs at all, some turn into bingo daubers and slide along. Prior to this, Fry was walking like a zombie, aka a reanimated human. I would think walking like a constipated circus bear should actually help him blend in more, no? Consider for a moment the mechanics of male anatomy concealed within this costume. There is no way he's hitting anything other than his own feet or the inside of the barrel, and that's assuming he was able to get his fly open, which clearly required him to break his wrists.
Hurry up, Fry!
This robot reaches the corner long before Leela reacts to warn Fry.
Sir, are you aware that you're leaking coolant at an alarming rate?
Who voices this robot that's watching Fry pee?
It's Tom Kenny,
Eyeing his urine stream curiously.
voice of SpongeBob.
Completely confused by his human willy. So apparently both of the major Futurama wikis call this guy the resin offering robot.
Let me just patch you up with some hot resin.
Poor guy's entire identity has been defined by this one moment. Is it so hard to use his name? Which we know, by the way, it's revealed in Free Will Hunting to be Mr. 14757395258966764129227.
I think the leak's stopping itself.
What sort of robot turns down a free blast of searing hot resin?
This kind?
I'm the janitor. I'm trying to take a nap here.
I'm sorry, I thought you were made of wax.
I am made of wax. What's it to you?
Watch as SpongeBob here breaks the space-time continuum twice in a matter of seconds. After he stops and before he turns his head, there are two different animation frames visible, one layered on top of the other. And when Leela knocks him down, he falls on his front, which is the side with the yellow triangle. His head was turned backwards. But when the Human Patrol robots pick him up, his torso has somehow flipped. And now it's time for a classic sci-fi reference barrage. The scream from the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Voices and lines from the 1980 arcade game Berserk.
Get the humanoid.
Get the intruder.
Intruder alert. Intruder alert.
Intruder alert. Intruder alert.
Get the intruder.
The title of the 1953 film It Came from Outer Space, which was Universal's first film ever produced in 3D.
Wow, the 3D's great!
Mine's not working.
I see what you did there.
Did you hear that, Rusty? It sounded like a human.
Relax, Wendy. Humans will never come to our defenseless little town.
Ladies and gentlemen, John DiMaggio. Voice of Bender, if you weren't aware.
I will eat and digest you all with...
Who directed this crap? The mouth doesn't even move when the robot is speaking these lines, which is unsettling for me, a human viewer, but this movie was made for a robot audience. Wouldn't it be far more unsettling for them to watch the human talking through a flapping orifice? Not to mention, they clearly hired a bunch of kindergartners to make the special effects. I'm telling you, man, this franchise has gone to hell since they were bought by Disney. Also, Amy is not my girlfriend in this scene. This is how you get ants, and scene does not contain a lap dance.
The human was impervious to our most powerful magnetic fields, yet in the end succumbed to a harmless sharpened stick.
I feel like this is an allusion to War of the Worlds, in which invading aliens of superior technological strength are defeated by something small and harmless to humans. It could be a bit of a stretch, although there's definitely a similar theme. Let me know what you think in the comments. Human horror is a booming genre on Chopek 9. There's a poster for I Was a Teenage Human. Buffbot the Human Slayer, obviously a reference to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, although this design doesn't correspond to any real-life poster I was able to find. Then ChatGPT told me it was a scene from the climax of the original Buffy movie, but as usual, it was a web of lies. So if anyone knows what this is really based off of, if anything, let me know in the comments, would you? There's also It Came from Planet Earth, which is the one our heroes just watched, and then we have, perhaps the most horrifying human aspect imaginable, Barbra Streisand's nose. Actually, this Yentl movie sounds kind of interesting, although strangely, I had no desire to see it until someone told me not to.
Okay, keep an eye out for Bender.
Look, guys, it already stretches credulity that you're walking around with uncovered faces and none of the robots are getting suspicious. All you're doing by blocking your faces like this is making it harder to hear each other.
So, what did you think of the movie?
Too much romance, not enough human killing.
Yeah, it was a real chick flick.
Both of these robots are voiced by the actor who plays Fry, Billy West.
Time for the daily human hunt.
I was going to question the pitchforks and torches until I rewatched Free Will Hunting and realized that yes, they do have farms on this planet. So carry on, murderous mob, carry on.
Try to stay with the crowd so no one notices how crummy you look.
Oh, that was uncalled for.
I'm over here.
I guess I have to take back my earlier critique of Fry's costume. Clearly it's far more lore accurate than Leela's. As I watch this robot brandish a Flintstones Brontosaurus steak with what looks like the finger claw from a much larger robot jammed through it, I realize just how poorly designed these robot hands are. How on earth do they hold on to anything?
Many said I was too extreme when I first called for the annihilation of the human species, as well as some of the more cunning monkeys.
You're good with the apes, though? Or did they all leave when the simians established their own human-hating planet?
You'll want to purchase my spoken word album. Act now and you'll get this Bender action figurine.
He's clearly been planning for something like this. These crowd shots really showcase how many of these robots are duplicates of one another, which makes me wonder if there was some type of common programming error or design flaw that made certain kinds of robots become human-hating separatists.
Bite my shiny metal ass.
This is the second time we hear this line, and the final time we'll hear it in Season 1, and it's said by an action figure, which suggests that it's already an established catchphrase, but Bender's only said it once.
Let the hunt begin!
Wait a minute. Look, man, I vote everything that happened. I'm just gonna. I'm gonna go up, okay? Yeah. I'd know that garbled, tinny attempt to synthesize a classy startup sound anywhere. This explains so much about this planet. The robot's contrarianism, the different for the sake of being different design choices, the horrible non-ergonomic peripherals. I mean, I get it now. If I were intentionally designed to become obsolete within 2 years and one day I wake up and my legs don't work because the latest auto update is incompatible with my current software, and for some reason I can't connect to the Wi-Fi in the bedroom even though my Samsung connects just fine, yeah, I'd be pretty mad at God too.
Is it true they bite your neck and suck your transmission fluid and then you become a human?
Sure, why not?
I can buy this robot having a transmission, but why would the fluid lines run up through the neck? Does he have 5-speed head rotation? Also, I just realized that these robots with glowing red eyes abandoned the tradition of all robots, even these weirdos, having square pupils.
Well, that makes 146,000 unsuccessful hunts in a row. But I've got a good feeling about tomorrow.
We're not told how long a day or a year is on Chopek 9, but it's interesting to note that a 365-day year would mean that the robots have been doing this hunt every day for exactly 400 years. If we account for leap years, of which there are 97 between the years 2600 and 3000, that brings it down to about 3 months shy of 400 years. Either way, this lines up with the robot elders saying that the robot civilization began over 4 centuries ago. Still, there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know how long a day is, how long after the colonization of the planet they started doing the human hunt, or if the 146,000 unsuccessful hunts goes back to the very first hunt, or just the last time they actually found a human. I'm assuming it's the former because it's a lot funnier to think that they've never actually found a human. In any case, it would make sense for the robots to be running on Earth time, since that's where they came from, that's where their internal clocks were calibrated, etc. And we appear to be looking at a planet with an opaque atmosphere, although the in-episode movie does show scenes with clear skies, so maybe it's a seasonal thing. Regardless, the robots probably aren't affected by things like day-night cycles or seasonal changes, so they might be running on Earth time, regardless of how the days and years pass on their planet.
What's that?
That's the old abandoned adult bookstore. Nothing in there except maybe a few shreds of moldy old robot adult books.
Sounds like a breeding ground for humans.
Yeah, they really get turned on by all those schematics and whatnot.
Last we heard, you were under arrest as a human sympathizer.
They let me go and I told them I killed 1 billion humans.
Current estimates place the number of humans that have ever existed around 114 billion. Our current population is just over 8 billion. To even have 1 million billion humans by the year 3000, we need to increase our annual growth rate to 1.21%. We're currently sitting at 0.88%. So come on, people, get busy. I don't mind if you pause the video. Or keep it playing, I don't care. Just like and sub first, whatever you do.
Thank you, prosecutor. I will now consider the evidence.
I know there will be angry comments because I'm picking on Apple products, but look, I mean, come on. They might as well have called this episode Fear of a Mac Planet.
Isn't anyone gonna defend us?
Yeah, he may not have a case, but I'm genuinely not a human.
You might not want to dig too deep on that, Leela.
Uh-oh, he froze up again.
Try Control-Alt-Delete.
Have you even been listening? Command-Option-Escape.
Turn him off and on.
Clean the gook out of the mouse.
These are clearly the same kind of robot. Why does this one's mouth glow when it talks, but when this one talks, it's the Christmas lights of questionable usefulness that light up?
I find the defendants guilty. They will perform tedious calculations and spot weld automobiles until they become obsolete.
Not a life I'd pick either, but it's a far cry better than being killed on sight like the professor said they would. That they even got a trial is impressive. Maybe MACS aren't as bad as I thought. I mean, still bad, just not murder all humans bad. Fry and Leela fell exactly the same distance starting at exactly the same time, but somehow it took longer for Leela to hit the ground. Unless she has hidden skin flaps or something else to cause air resistance, that's not how falling works.
What's going on here?
Silence! Bring in Bender!
What? Fry and Leela fell for 2 solid seconds, meaning they fell nearly 20 meters, or the height of a 5 to 6 story building. So they're dead, first of all, but secondly, Bender somehow had time to get down there and saunter in right on cue, not 16 seconds later?
Come forward, Bender.
He's already as forward as he can get without things getting really inappropriate.
You will have the honor of executing the prisoners.
Use the ceremonial killamajig.
Scary as this thing looks, it seems a poorly designed and cumbersome way to kill someone. You've got 3 stabby bits up at the top here, which is redundant, and they're mounted on these flimsy jointed arms that are really going to reduce your stabbing power. And what's the point of these 2 things? Particularly this mace head. How are you supposed to hit somebody with that with any kind of force? The way it dangles and flails around is really going to throw your balance off when you're trying to use the other parts of the weapon. I feel like this thing was more lethal before all of the Swiss Army knife bits popped out of their compartments. It's also interesting that all of the gizmos are always on the side of the device that's facing us, the viewer. And here they've straight up switched sides. All of the robot elders have slight variations, but why is Mr. Green here the only one with a double-decker mouth?
Elders, execute function Control-Shift-Kill.
In most computer browsers, pressing Control-Shift-Delete is a shortcut to the window for deleting your browsing history. I have no idea why I felt compelled to mention that.
Take one more step, and I'll breathe fire on you.
They have guns.
Can they really breathe fire, or did we make that up?
Why would they be scared of fire anyway? They are robots carved from meteorites. Back in the courtroom, we briefly saw shackles on Fry's and Leela's ankles. After that, the foot shackles disappeared until this shot where Bender removes them. The elder on the far left, who by the way is the only one who doesn't speak in this episode, has red facial features until this scene where they switch to yellow. It's probably a mistake, but, well, maybe not. Fast forward to Free Will Hunting yet again, where the robot elders reappear. They're standing in a different order, so this might get a bit confusing, but stay with me here. The green, blue, and orange colored elders all have the same voices and appearances that they have in Fear of a Bot Planet. The robot with red features is now purple, which isn't a big deal. He changed out his bulbs or something. But he finally speaks, and he speaks with the voice of Jimmy, the elder who sounds like a total dullard.
Okay.
But in Fear of a Bot Planet, the yellow-eyed robot was Jimmy.
That's for sure.
And while it's possible that two robots could have the same voice, the yellow-eyed robot has a completely different voice in Free Will Hunting.
Well, speak up.
What I'm getting at is, did these two switch bodies? And if so, did this one briefly turn yellow here because it secretly envies Jimmy's appearance?
So long, suckers! Hello, suckers?
This movement matches what the robots are doing. This does not.
Hold on a second, I forgot to deliver the package.
I never thought I'd say this, but Bender takes his job too seriously.
Lug nuts! Precious lug nuts!
Hooray for the humans!
And that was all it took to overcome centuries of prejudice. The end.
Can't believe you guys did all this for me.
Is that an oil drum jack-o'-lantern? There was one naked alien in the entire stinking episode, and it wasn't anywhere close to gratuitous. False advertising. If you're watching this right after the video went live, I'm going to be doing a live stream in a couple of hours. You can come hang out right here on this channel. Just making sure this is actual ground and not frozen water right here. We can talk about Futurama, we can talk about other shows and movies. You guys can ask questions about my videos if you have any. And if you're watching this after the fact, you can catch the replay of that stream. It'll stay up on the channel as long as it's not a complete disaster. I don't know how it's going to go. I've never done one of these before. So I will see you there.